this video, I'm going to be giving you my full painting process for this photo I made right here. So I want to invite you all to grab your canvas, grab your sketchbook, grab anything that you need, grab your best friend, grab your favorite movie. Let's get started. All right, everybody, to get started, I took some of my burnt sienna, I just took a little bit out of the tube. And for my underpainting, I like to get my proportions right by starting off with the forehead, because the forehead is a very simple area and it easily transitions down to areas such as the nose, and then from the nose you can go on to the eyes, and then from there you can go to the lips, and then you can get the head shape. So that is exactly what I followed over here, and the extra lines that I'm putting on his face are just to map out where the shadows will go, because the photo that I'm making has a lot of shadows. And I find it very helpful to map out the shadows as well, because you can get your proportions better by doing it that way, rather than trying to get all the hard features first and then you add the shadows on later. So if you're following along, I want you to really emphasize mapping out where all the shadows are on your photo and try to get an accurate placement of where the shadows will go, because that's an easy way how you can get your proportions better. If you're struggling with proportions, try to do that and then find the difference that it will make. All right, so that is gonna add some extra lines, and it's not to make it a little bit more confusing, it's just to really help you out. And once we start adding in the colors, then everything will start coming together and it'll be a little bit less cluttered. So for my shadows, I always like to start off with a little bit of my burnt umber. I just took a little bit out of the tube and I'm applying it right here, you see, and I'm putting it in those areas that I mapped out that my shadows will go. And I'm just very lightly brushing over this, and you see that my underpainting is dry too, because I mixed it with some Gamsol. Gamsol is paint thinner, so it's going to change the properties of the oil paint. If I didn't add the Gamsol, then the paint will be smearing on top of each other and I'll be getting like a very messy picture right now. So you always want to make sure that for your underpainting you use a little bit of Gamsol in your oil paints, because you don't want anything to smear when you're trying to create your project. You want everything to be clean and you want everything to be neat. So even when you add the Gamsol, the paint is still going to take a little bit to dry, so always make sure that is dry before you start layering on top of it with your shadows. So even if you have to give it around like an hour or so, and then make sure that is dry to the touch. So once it's dry to the touch, then you should be good to paint over it. So for me, it was dry to the touch and I'm ready to start painting now. So I'm putting the shadows in the areas like the lips, the upper lip, and the nose. And this photo that I'm painting right here has a lot of shadows, so there's a lot of areas that I have to cover up. And after you start putting the shadows, you already see that there's some of the form coming together and the picture is cleaning up some. It's not really too many lines for me to look at, and everything is a little bit more organized now. And all of the techniques I'm using and more are all shared in my free 7-step guide on how to paint portraits perfectly every single time. So if you're interested, check that link in the description and join the emailing list as well. After I added the burnt umber to the shaded places on the face, I added it to the hairline as well, so that I can tell where the skin will end and also where the hair will begin. So I didn't really fill out the hair area. This was just for me to get like a benchmark that I can follow. So now it's time to start off with the darkest places of the skin. So I'm going to be mixing some of my burnt sienna and some of my yellow ochre. And the skin that I'm making is a little bit of an orangish tint. So you're going to see me like make a very orange color. It's not necessarily like a tan color for normal white skin, but I'm creating this one to really emphasize the warmth in the picture. But you really don't want to use large amounts when you're mixing paint. You see that I'm only grabbing a little bit off the tip of my palette knife right there, and I can also reuse the colors that I already have on my palette, so you don't need to always squeeze out new colors every single time that you're trying to mix a color. Just keep the colors that you make, and you can always reuse them. You can lighten them, you can darken them, you can add like different colors to them. So this is very important, because I really like to reuse the colors that I have, because it saves me a lot of paint, and I think that you guys should do it too. And it just makes the time that it takes to finish a painting much more faster, because mixing colors takes a very long time and is going to take up most of your painting process. It actually takes more time to mix all of the paints that you need than it does to actually finish the painting. And I don't know why people don't really say that as much, but once I actually started painting, this is when I figured this out. So it's good to always have the colors that you need on standby, and you can just pick from them and you can easily apply them down so you don't have to waste any extra time. But I added the darkest skin tones to the cheek areas and also around the forehead and the chin, because that was where on the photo the light was shining the least. And I'm also gonna add some of the lighter areas in between these to give the face some more shape on a later stage. But I wanted to darken up some of this area on the chin, and I'm using some of my burnt sienna that's straight from the tube, because the burnt sienna has a reddish tone to it and it would match the oranges and warm skin tone that I'm creating right here. And just to really make the area stand out, I'm just grabbing a little bit of my burnt umber. I'm just lightly applying it. I'm barely putting any pressure on the brush right here. I'm just lightly tapping it on top of the paint that's already laid down. And that's the way how I like to darken up some of my areas without it being too strong or without it standing out too much. I just apply it on top of the paint that's already there. I don't really put too much pressure. And just the same thing that I'm doing right here. And this is the perfect time for you to fix up any of those dark areas that you may have missed out on. That's exactly what I'm doing right now, because the photo has some areas that I missed out on and I might have overlooked when I was starting off, but right now they're starting to stand out. And when you get to a certain point of the picture, then you start to really see the smaller details. I think that first you need to get a base covered out before you actually start to see like the very fine details that you may have missed. But these are very simple. There's not really too much that you have to do. And blocking out is the only hard stage that you really have to face with painting. But after you finish blocking out and getting all of the colors where they need to go, then sharpening up is just a very easy thing. That's my favorite part. Just sharpening up things, and really don't have to apply too much extra paint. You're just making edges smoother, you're making parts pop out, and you're making your lines a little bit softer too. So that's why you really want to focus on getting your blocking out phase locked down. You want to get it really good, and you want to be very consistent with your practice, because when you're very consistent with your practice and you keep a lot of your techniques the same, then you will get really good and you'll get really fast. That's exactly what I did too, and I kept the same exact routine. I really like to emphasize you keeping the same exact routine every single time that you paint, because it gets your brain in a mental state that it's familiar with, and you're able to put a lot of your mental energy towards the things that you actually want to focus on. Because when you change too many things around your environment, you change your paints that you use, you change your place that you paint, you change the book that you paint in, then it's gonna throw you off. I know it sounds like a very small thing, but it's shown in so many areas of your life too. Like when you change up variables that you start to become unfamiliar with, then it's harder for you to get into your focus state or your flow state. So use the same routines, follow the same techniques, and really try to get the muscle memory down, because once you get the muscle memory down, then that's when the sharpening up becomes very easy and you get to it very quickly. But at this point, I'm pretty much done with all my dark areas, because I found all the areas that needed some touching up. So I'm gonna start adding my light areas now, and the photo will really start to have its magic now that I add these light areas, and everything will start to look three-dimensional and have its pop. So for the light areas, I'm using some yellow ochre, and I mixed it with a little bit of the white. And for some other white areas too, I'm using some of the paint I already had before, that orange on the palette, and I mixed it with some of the white that I have right there. So that is why I really emphasize that you shouldn't scrap your colors. You should keep them on your palette and reuse them, because you'll save a lot of paint and you'll save a lot of time. I just saved myself so much time by just keeping this paint on my palette. But my yellow areas are added on the forehead and in those gaps in between the dark colors, and everything is starting to come together now, but it's still not all the way there yet. So I need to touch up some lighter areas too and fill out the eyes. And the eyes are a very simple area. I just created an outline of where the pupils will go and fill out the white of the eyes, because the right eye on this photo is the only one that's really showing, and the left side of the eye is just a shadow with a light reflection on it. And when I'm filling out these smaller areas that have white in them, I'm using my smaller brush. You see that I'm not using the same one that I did with the skin, because the one for the skin will be too large and it'll have a hard time trying to not get it onto unwanted areas. So that's why I also recommend that you should get a set of like 5 different size brushes. The more that you can get, the better, because you will have more to work with and you'll be able to apply to very large areas and also very small areas. And you can get these off of Amazon or from your local art store. It doesn't really have to be anything too crazy, but just having these by your side will make it so much easier and will make your process so much better. You'll make way better paintings that are less messy, and you'll have like sharper lines just overall. But if you are going to use the same brush, always make sure that you clean it off very well. Clean it off with your Gamsol, that's the paint thinner. Go like 3 rounds of that, and then also wipe it on a piece of paper towel. Because if you don't do that and you try to apply it straight after using a different color, the colors will mix and you'll get a white area that's mixed with like the orange, or you get it mixed with the yellow that I'm using right now. But I'm using the same size brush that I use for the whites of the eye for the pupil, and I'm leaving a little bit of space in the middle of the eye for some black. And I'm gonna go on top of all of these dark areas that I already made and touch up some black on, not all of it, but just the areas that really need to be darkened up. But before I do that, I want to go in with my whites, and this is the part that is really gonna make all of these white parts that I made stand out. Before, they didn't really stand out that much, but when you add pure white, that's like the final blow that's really gonna make everything like have its significance and make everything shine. So I'm also using the same size brush for this as well, because it's not really large areas that I have to fill out. I'm gonna use the larger brush for the areas like the forehead, but for these small areas that are like on the cheeks and around the eyes, I'm still using the very small brush. You don't want to add too much, and I'm not really using too much pressure. I'm just lightly dabbling that white on top of it. But for the forehead, I'm using the same brush that I used for the skin. I just cleaned it off, and I'm using the same brush that I used for the skin because I want everything to be blended smoothly. I don't want the whites to really stand out like how it does underneath the eye. I want it to just be a smooth transition between the darks all the way to the lights and where the light is shining on his forehead. But next, I also have to work on the lips. And the lips, I'm really using the same colors that I already have in my palette. I just use a little bit of the red, mixed it with some of the burnt sienna to get the red a little bit darker, because the red on the lips is a little bit of a darker tone, but it still has a little bit of that red shine on it. So I'm applying it all over here, and I'm gonna start to lighten it up with the white on the palette and give the lip a little bit of a shine. But after this, right now, I'm gonna start to add the shadows on the left side of the face, and for that, I'm gonna be using some of my black and French ultramarine blue. But this is like the point of the painting where we're pretty much done and we're smooth sailing. I really enjoyed making this painting, and I had a really good time. And again, I want to invite you all to that emailing list in the description. And over there, you're not only going to get access to that 7-step guide on how to paint portraits perfectly every single time, but over there is where you're going to get access to me and my help. All right, I'm going to launch coaching, and over here you're going to get early access to that coaching. So this is where you should go if you want to learn how to get better, if you're struggling, or if you have any questions. I know that painting can be tough and you feel like it's all talent, but really I've learned and I've really developed my art a ton over the past few years, and I want to give you all this help. But I'm not going to be able to give you much more value out of these YouTube videos, but if you really want that, it's in the description. Check that out, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.